Hello and welcome back to the Day Luna Human Design Podcast with your hosts, Dana and Shayna. Today is a solo episode where we want to talk about four-line energy. As you might have listened to our three-line energy podcast, this is where we are breaking down the different lines and how they might affect you. Because whether you have a four in your profile or not, you are still affected by four-line energy because of the transits. So, and also other people in your life having four lines, and also your other placements wherever those might fall can have a four after that gate. So if you're looking at your human design chart, we'll kind of walk you through it, but it's kind of helpful to know the transits. We find it really supportive. I've noticed with my daughter that the line days really impact her, which is really interesting because observing how human design is showing up in an infant who isn't necessarily, you know, you're not telling them how to use their strategy and authority from this mental place, but seeing what does really impact her day to day. The line days is a big part of it. So if it's impacting our like infants, it's definitely impacting all of us, whether we realize it or not. And so we just find it so helpful to lean in.
It's so weird for you to call her an infant because I think of her as like ancient for some reason, like an ancient
Same.
soul. So calling her infant, I'm like, that word didn't even register.
I know, because she's
She's
not an
like
infant. She is a
a
wise old
wise
soul.
old, like our ancestors
Yeah.
here in a little baby's body. But anyways, that is really interesting to see how human design and energy can be felt by children before they've been conditioned. And actually, I was just talking with my friend the other day. Have you seen the movie yet that's called My Old Ass with Aubrey?
No.
Oh my God, it's so cute. It's
Wait,
literally
is it
the
new?
sweetest. It's new, it's on Netflix. And it's literally the sweetest movie ever. And I don't want to like give it away, like the plot twist in it, but
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
like this girl is like a teenager and her older self comes to her and they become friends, and there's like this back and forth between the wisdom of someone who's younger and the wisdom of someone who's older, but also the downfalls of being older, being more conditioned, being more fearful because you've experienced failure. And so it was just like really
Wow.
interesting. And my friend and I were talking about it for like an hour about how this younger person is like following her authority and feels energy in her body so much and trusts it. And that sometimes that is such the wisdom of the youth that they literally haven't been programmed against it yet. They
Yeah.
haven't been taught to not just naturally feel what they're feeling from the energy around them yet. Anyways, highly recommend if you haven't
I
watched
can't
it
wait
yet.
to watch that. And that's been one of my favorite things about becoming a mom is like, and knowing so much about human design is holding the space for her to be her design, whether, she knows her design or not mentally, like being able to see what's supportive for her based off of her design and experiment with it and see how she responds to that. But also like observing how she naturally is that energy, right? Without any conditioning or people judging it or contorting it in some way for her. Like she doesn't give a fuck, right? Like she is that energy whether you want it or not. And feeling really protective of that. Like I want to hold that space for her to blossom into her own energy without um other influences kind of dictating who she should be and how she should act. And that sounds crazy because we think that that would happen at like an older age, right? Like once they're more vocal and speaking and having that like what's that word, like critical thinking. But I hear people, I read people online like in comments and shit saying like judgments and rules and all of these things for their babies that maybe worked for their friend or maybe worked for them as a baby, and holding their baby to this standard. I mean, you can hear her in the background here, holding their baby to this standard of a very mental place versus holding space for the energetics and how we're all different. So that's a whole other podcast topic. Probably we should dive into
Many,
that.
many topics.
Yeah.
Many, many episodes, I'm sure. But it is so interesting because Shayna and I both are 2-4 profiles. So we have a 4 line right in our profile. And if you're looking at your human design chart, look for the written categories, and next to profile, you'll see yours. And maybe you're a 1-4 or a 2-4, like we are. Maybe you're a 4-6, or maybe you're a profile that doesn't have a 4 in it at all, right? But if you have a 4 line anywhere in your profile, like Shayna and I do, this 4 line energy, which is all about building really deep friendships and connection. 4 line energy is the first foundational line of the upper triagram of the 6 lines of the profile, which means it's the foundation of externalizing, of sharing, of transpersonal relationships. So for anyone with a 4 in their profile, these this friendliness and this connection on this deep, authentic level is one of the most important things in your entire life. If you look at yourself on the stage of life, like you're the main character of a movie, if you have a 4 line, your direct, close personal relationships are going to be the main plot in the movie. Whereas if you have a 3 in your profile, like Shayna's baby does, she's a 3-5, maybe you're a 1-3, maybe you're a 6-3. If you have a 3 in your profile, one of the main energies in your movie, if you're the main character on the stage, is about the things that you try, that trial and error process, trying something and going on an adventure and doing something that is unknown, sort of pushing the envelope. That is the most important plot line in your story. So, right then and there, I mean, we all go on adventures, we all have close relationships. It's just that there's such a strong emphasis on those energies in your life if that is in your profile.
Yeah, and I really see this show up in my life and observing other people that have, different profiles where they don't have a 4 in their chart, how different I am from them, with the lessons that I'm here to learn and how I'm meant to connect with people. So if you have a 4 in your profile, you're 4-1 or 1-4 or 4-6 or 2-4, like Dana and I, you have this brotherhood, sisterhood kind of energy. And you are designed to have close connections and more like quality over quantity when it comes to your relationships. And the energy behind that brotherhood, sisterhood kind of frequency is people feeling close to you, even if they don't necessarily know you. So, for example, with Dana and I in this podcast, we really share ourselves vulnerably and openly. We share ourselves in a very intimate way, and we share our bond that we have with each other, with everyone listening here. And every single person that we've ever worked with as a client or met at a retreat or who's purchased our book, like every single listener here feels like that sisterhood, brotherhood community, that closeness. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, like, I feel like I know you, like you're my best friend and we're so aligned. And here's why. And I love it because we really get to create this close relationship with people just by showing that intimate, vulnerable closeness in this podcast space. But the pros of having a 4 in your profile is that building deep connections that feel safe for you, it creates that safety and that opportunity and support for other people. So that's amazing. But there can be some cons to having this 4 line, like you need stability and you thrive when you have these established friendships. So sometimes it can be hard to feel like you're thriving if you're always surrounded by strangers and you don't have that closeness. There can be this loneliness that creeps in and you feel really rocked. So there's a lot of different ways that you can combat loneliness, and we'll get into that. But just knowing that there's a reason why you're wanting that quality, deep, close connection, and that you're needing more of that stability in your life and established friendships in your life if you have this 4 line.
And knowing these things about myself, having a 4 in my profile is huge because there's such a strong traditional business advice standard idea that you should never work with family. You should never work with friends because it could possibly go so horribly wrong. And for Shayna and I, it's like those people, our family and our friends, if we really, really resonate with them and we feel this safety, this close authentic bond, that's the best person for us to work with, actually. And cultivating those relationships in your life, deepening them, spending time nourishing like a garden those relationships in your life, that's always going to create more opportunities. That is where opportunities come from a four line. So you might have seen that in traditional human design, the four line is called the opportunist. That is what this means. When you have really authentic, aligned, deep personal relationships, those relationships are always going to be the place where doors open for you. And that's also been something that we've really experienced. One super close friend that's really resonant, and let us meet their whole group of best friends and family members that they've known forever. And those people, maybe there's 5 of them, we've known for years, and countless opportunities have come from being connected to them. And that's been something that I've judged myself on a lot, because when you hear about being an opportunist and a networker, it feels like you need to be out at big events, shaking hands with strangers and pitching yourself to people. That's the opposite of what a four line does. So even though a four line is really good at networking, and they can have very strong, meaningful networks in their life that create a lot of opportunities, it's not in that stranger energy. It's way more with like your brother, your actual brother, or your actual sister, or your cousin, and creating that relationship. You might feel like, what am I doing? Am I not getting myself out there? But then that person ends up being able to connect you with where you're really meant to be. So just knowing that, letting that be your truth, and just knowing that that traditional business advice, like don't work with your best friend or don't work with your family member, might not apply to you if you're a four line. Of course, still use your authority and make sure that person is actually resonant, not you're not just creating a project with them because you're close to them, but you actually feel a deep closeness and resonance, not just like a physical proximity with that person.
Yeah, and when it comes to combating loneliness, and, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, "I have a 4 in my profile, but I don't have any quality, stable, close relationships in my life right now," it all has to start with you showing up and sharing in a very authentic and vulnerable way, creating that sense of closeness. So what that looks like is, let's say, going on a retreat and really sharing yourself openly and sharing your experiences, having those deep conversations. A lot of times people with a 4 in their profile already are, asking people about their childhood trauma and diving into, what's holding you back right now, or where are you really wanting to go? Are you actually happy? They're not so much focused on like the small talk of like, what do you do for work? They're more so focused on like, how do you feel about your work? Are you enjoying it? How is your work life balance? So bringing that sense of intimacy to the spaces that you're in, whether that's at work, whether that's going to, a retreat where you're meeting people, whether that's at a yoga studio or a coffee shop, bringing that sense of intimacy is going to then allow people to see you in that intimate way and create those closer bonds. Um, so I would encourage you to lean in there, because the quality of your life, as with a 4 in your profile, is in direct proportion to the quality of your network of friends and your genuine camaraderie that you have with the people in your life. So there's some sides to a 4 line where human design says you can kind of swing between kindness or meanness, or having a swing between being a confidant or not. So let's get into the kind of, I don't know, the other side of the pendulum
The dark
with
side
the
of being
dark
a four
side.
line. And I did want to
Yeah.
say that if you're listening to this and you don't have a four in your profile, but you're like, I really resonate with needing quality over quantity friends. I really resonate with a lot of my opportunities coming from really close people. I really resonate with not wanting to have small talk. We want to encourage you to look at your entire chart, your human design chart. And if you're looking at your body graph, you'll see these 2 columns on either side that have all of your gates listed on the right hand side and the left hand side. And you'll see maybe your sun gate is gate 60.2. And as you go down, we want you to look at that number that's after the decimal point. If you have a lot of fours, in other places, then this conversation is going to resonate with you, even though you might not have a 4 in your profile. So I just want to encourage you to go ahead and look at your chart and count how many 4s do I have after that decimal point in all of the different gates of my chart. Because if I have quite a lot, then this 4-line energy is going to be something that I do feel maybe not as the number one plot theme in my movie, but maybe as like a secondary plot theme. But getting back into what Shayna was saying about the pendulum swinging from right to left, from dark to light, like everything in human design has this duality or this binary, right? Where it really can be on one hand this and on one hand that, which is what Ra says, but it's like
The
on one
this and the that of it.
the this and the that of everything. On one hand, it can be a positive. On one hand, it can be a challenge, right? On one hand, it can be giving something. On one hand, it could be taking it away, all in the same quality. So with a 4-line, like Shayna was saying, 4-lines love to be close. They love to get the real, and they love to be kind to people, to make help people be safe. But it also can swing to the other side of that binary, on the other side of that pendulum, which is being mean and gossiping about someone in a way that's hurtful, or not being friendly to someone, but instead being like mean girls, high school rude to someone. That can happen as well with a 4-line. And there can be a very negative expression of that pendulum swinging back and forth. But also, even if you're really aligned and living in your self theme, you're still going to sort of swing sometimes from kindness to meanness. Like, even in our lives, when we're really feeling good about life and we're feeling really aligned and successful, we'll still swing sometimes to that from that kindness to the meanness. And it's not necessarily a harmful meanness because we don't project it onto people or externalize, but we do sometimes feel this feeling of like, I just don't care what they're saying, or like it's just rubbing me the wrong way, like this sort of mean energy. But we can take that as like, this person's not right for me. And we don't need to say something harmful. We don't need to think like make a judgment on that person, but we can just take that frequency shift as a signpost that that person's not right for you, and not judge yourself about it, but really just have awareness. Like, yeah, that's the other side of the coin of this 4-line energy I have. I am so kind. I am so compassionate, but I don't need to hold myself to that forever and make myself be kind and compassionate to every single person without discernment. I really have to sort of listen to the other side of when I just don't feel like being that close to this person or giving them all my time, because it might not really be aligned for me to do so. I don't have to be mean. I don't have to be harmful, but I do need to listen to that discernment.
Yeah, and that pendulum swing is meant to happen. Like Ra would say that it's not negative or positive. Like they're going to be, anyone with a 4 in their profile is going to be really kind and compassionate, and they're going to be kind of mean and um gossipy sometimes, and that you're allowing the pendulum to swing is really reliant on you using your strategy and authority. If it's going to come out in a way that is actually serving you and serving everyone else around you because you're in energetic alignment, or if it's going to come out in a way that is bringing you off course and thus bringing other people off course too, because you have this energetic resistance, or dissonance, if you will. So letting the pendulum swing is really, the ease comes from using your strategy and authority always. But I do want to say that swing can happen in a conversation where you're talking with someone like your partner, for example, and you feel that like kindness, confidant, closeness coming out, and then like an hour later you're like mean for some for no reason. And
Evil
it's
laugh.
not.
This is my evil laugh
Yeah.
because I have felt that so much in my personal relationship, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I can be so mean to Brian sometimes, and it's like, and then afterwards he'll be like, "That was mean," and I'm like, "That was mean, like, shit." And and then it's about swinging back to the other side. So it's knowing, like, you gotta be able to call yourself out, right? And
Yeah.
and be able to see both sides, because that's where you're in alignment, is letting yourself swing from both sides, but also being able to say and notice, like, "That was mean, and I actually didn't mean what I said," or "I didn't that's not my truth. I just was in this kind of little bitchy place." And
Yeah.
I see it show up like conversation to conversation. I mean, obviously, I think we're conditioned to think like you have to be kind to everyone all the time. And it's not about like letting yourself be mean to somebody on the street. Like that is not this energy. It's just knowing that you might shift into a place where you're just like, I don't feel like it. I don't feel like being nice right now. I feel like just staying in my own lane. So
Right.
that's gonna
And
swap. And I do want to, oh, go ahead.
I just was going to say that I think anyone can struggle with people pleasing. I think that it's such a thing that we've been conditioned to do, no matter who you are, no matter what your design is, no matter what your gender is, but especially if you're a resonate as a female, I feel like that people pleasing can be so big. And then if you have a 4 line in your profile, it can be so big to really
Yeah.
want to people please and to always be kind and to disconnect, like sort of to reject the side of you that gets mad or that gets mean. And I can say that I'm really guilty of that, that there's been times in my life where I'm like, it's never okay for me to be mad at someone. It's never okay for me to not be literally as sweet as sugar. Like I feel when I say one little thing that's like hardly even mean, I'm so hard on myself. And knowing about this pendulum swing and knowing that it's healthy for me, but just having it be in the highest expression, which is about having awareness of it, that's been huge for me. It's really helped me stop judging myself and let go of perfectionism and thinking that I always need to be nice. And when you actually do that, ironically, you're nicer to people overall because when you're denying the part of you that is over it or is feeling angry or mean internally, when you're denying that, it can lash out in a big way. And you can be really hurtful to people externally if you are rejecting some side of you instead of just observing it, flowing with it, and having awareness of it in a healthy and responsible way.
Yeah, exactly. I think Gen Z is definitely helping us with our what's acceptable and what's not in our relationships and with our mental health and all of that stuff. TikTok has been really helpful to share all these ideas and really hash things out to figure out what is needed and what's not. But with this same pendulum swing that we're talking about, there's this confidant or not. Like you might find yourself with certain topics, certain people, um, being that confidant, like, I will never share a word of this to anyone, and you don't. Like, you are like a locked little treasure chest and it never comes out. And then there's other things where it's like, "Ooh, give me the tea." Like, I want the tea. 4 lines, want the tea. They love to chat about all the little things, and um, what I'm talking about with TikTok is there's been a lot of things lately really hashing out like is gossip what's healthy gossip and what's not healthy gossip. And if you're talking about your own life and the things that are affecting you and what you're observing, like hashing shit out with your close confidant friends, I think that's a form of therapy. Like holding that in and not talking about that, especially as a 4 line, can actually be really toxic for your energy because you're meant to share in that close, intimate way. But if you're not ever talking about the things that maybe somebody rubbed you the wrong way or something really hurt your feelings with someone, then you're not actually showing up vulnerably and close in that relationship. You're like keeping part of yourself back. So there's been so much that I've been observing, like, oh, that's literally your therapy call with your close confidant friend, and that is that 4 line energy of the not side of the confidant, like, actually sharing, "This person hurt my feelings, and this was fucked up," and whatever. Some outside person might be like, that's gossip, let's not talk about that," but there's a part of you that you're denying when you do that, if it's coming from a genuine, like, this is how you feel place that you're needing to air out in that close, intimate way. So you're meant to swing back and forth. I can't tell you how many people in my life have a 4 line where it's like, we can't wait to get together to hear like what's going on in your relationship and what's going on with your work and like, how are you feeling? And tell me all the tea and like what's happening with this coworker, like all those things, right? It's so much fun. But other people who don't have a lot of 4 line energy in their chart, they're like, I'm over it. Like, this is boring. Like, I don't want to talk about this shit. And that's okay. They're not meant to. Like, I don't force my husband to have like hot goss with me. Um, and but I do with like his mom and his sister, like we get down on some chat. So just knowing like they both have 4 lines in their profile, but Isla, my daughter, she has like 0 4 line energy. So it's gonna be really
Wow.
interesting to see how that shows up for her if she's
She's
just
going to be
like,
rolling her eyes like, Mom, stop.
yes. And I have noticed myself really checking myself to keep me on the like higher expression of it, of trying not to be so judgmental, because that's definitely a shadow of being a projector, first of all, and having a 4 in your profile, is being really judgmental and not wanting her to see me vocalizing judgments that aren't like coming from a like closeness place, but that are coming from like that meanness, judgmental place. And then her feeling like, gosh, if she can judge those people, is she going to judge me that way? Right. So, and because she has no 4 line energy in her chart, like literally none, um, I'm
She's not
really
going to
aware of
delight
it.
it.
Yeah, she's not
Oh,
gonna
that's so
delight in the little slither inside of the 4 line.
So interesting. Yeah, one time when I was in high school, I had this like spiritual experience where I told my mom, like, I decided I'm never going to talk about a single person when they're not in the room ever again for the rest of my life. Like, I decided I'm committed. And I thought she was going to praise me and be like, that's so amazing of you. And instead, she was like, don't be so boring. And I was like, oh, okay. But
That's
it
funny.
stuck with me to this day that like as a 4 line, I find other people so interesting. As a projector, I find other people so interesting. But as a 4 line, I want to know everything and I want to listen and I want to hear them and I want to be a safe place for people's secrets to land. And I want to be non judgmental and supportive. And so it's like for me to not actually want to hear stories of the people I care about is not actually a line for me. Like it just came from like this external place of once again sort of judging myself. But it's really interesting now when I gossip or when I talk about other people, I am really aware of like, is this in the highest expression of it? Are we saying things that are true? Are we saying things that, keeping on my side of the street and not judging people within it? Like there's is definitely that way to check yourself. And this sort of brings me to the way that this conversation applies to every single person, whether you have a 4 in your profile or whether you have a lot of 4s after the decimal points of your gates or whether you don't, right? Either way, all of us experience 4 line energy when the sun transits through the 4th line of each gate. So, approximately each week or approximately every 6 days, the sun is transiting through the 4th line of that gate. And this is something that we talk about a lot in Besties. So if you've never heard of Line Days before and you're feeling curious, Besties is an amazing resource to learn about it. In general, Besties is an incredible resource to learn about human design. If you want to become a reader someday, or you want to go deeper in your human design knowledge, but you're not ready to commit to like a full training, Besties is an incredible resource. We have so many human design mini courses, a whole library of them where you can learn a lot of deeper stuff that we don't share anywhere else. We don't share on the podcast. We don't share on our Instagrams, like deeper, sort of more involved education there. And we have mini courses there where we talk about the line days, about how to work with them, how to plan your week with all of the 6 line days. And when we give our transit update, which comes direct to your email, we share the line days of that week. So when the sun is in the 4th line, this is the day that collectively we are wanting to share. We're wanting to listen. We're wanting the hot gossip. We're wanting to have that friendliness connection. We're wanting to create brotherhood, sisterhood community, that deeper community where it really feels safe to share. And also, people are curious on a 4 line day. They want to know what you're up to, they want to read the whole email. So, knowing this, you can really utilize a 4 line day. If you're an entrepreneur, for example, and you're doing a soft launch or you're sending a newsletter, a 4 line day could be a great day to send that because if you send it on, I don't know, let's say a 5 line day, people might be busy being practical and they're like, I don't have time to read this newsletter email all the way to the bottom and they don't even read it. But if you send that same newsletter on a 4 line day, the energy is supporting people to be curious and to want to get those updates and to want to read it all the way till the end and then actually read it twice and then send it to their friend. So it's just helpful to know that we can really utilize that 4 line energy in a positive way. A lot of people in like the more traditional human design space even say if you have like a hard conversation, like you're going to tell your boss that you're going to phase out or you're going to quit or something like that, to wait till a 4 line day because you just know it's going to be a day where someone's more receptive and interested and open and they actually want to hear you out instead of being like, I don't have time for this and I don't actually care how you feel. So it's really cool, I think, on a four line day to be able to observe that. And when I am feeling lonely on a four line day, because the opposite of friendliness can be sort of that isolation or that loneliness, like we were talking about in the beginning. When it's a four line day and I don't have any plans to be around people, I always ask myself if it feels aligned for me to call an old friend or to call a family member I haven't talked to in a long time. And just utilizing that energy, it feels like such a big gift for me. And oftentimes for that other person I call, it's like out of the blue, I haven't talked to them in years, maybe. And I call them and they're like, wow, I just feel like this was the perfect day. And so I think that there's a really sweet side of being intentional about using a four line day to create closeness and to allow that to kind of support that in our lives, whether we have a four in our profile or not.
Yes, I love it. It's all about connection, right? That's where this is coming from for all of us, whether we have that in our profile as our main profile or not. So, um, observing it, giving yourself that giant permission slip. I do want to talk about stability as a floor line and why stability is needed, as well as burnout and fatigue. So, do you want to dive into that, Dana?
Yeah, so with burnout and fatigue, the four line is associated with the ability to burn out. If you have a four in the first number of your profile, that's your personality side and your more mental side, if you will. Let's say you're 4 6, you can have a tendency to burn out on the mental plane and to have a lot of mental fatigue. Now, if you have a four line in the second number of your profile, like Shane and I do, being a 2 4, then the four is on the design side, which is more like the body side. And you can have a tendency to have fatigue in your body. And that can be one of the greatest sort of things that you remember about your life is just experiencing physical fatigue. So even if you're a generator and you're a 2 4 and you might really resonate with having burnout easily and just being fatigued more often, and that being something that needs to be a more conscious practice in your life to care for that. So that's something that I think is really interesting. And when I first learned that about myself, I was just like, yes, it just feels so resonant. I mean, we're also projectors on top of that, but I definitely feel that a lot. And that fatigue can really come from the fact that four lines are sort of inflexible, right? Because they're the foundational, four is the foundational energy in that upper triagram. With that, four can be sort of like that foundation can crack if you push it too much, or if it's doing too many things, or if it doesn't have stability in the physical place that you're in. So that's just something to really be aware of as a four line. If you are not having enough of a solid environment that you feel really good in and you don't have sort of like a routine, or you're not really um feeling like you sort of know where you're going at the current moment, you might have a greater tendency towards that burnout and that fatigue. So just be really aware of that, to be gentle with yourself. And on the other side of that, knowing that if you have a four in your profile or a lot of four placements in general, creating stability in your life is going to be something that energizes you. And this was another really big one for me because I live a very like nomadic and seasonal life, which I really enjoy doing. But when I haven't had a lot of stability in my home life, I definitely noticed that I felt way more fatigued, way more drained, and way more sort of like frazzled every time that I wanted my own way in my day to day life. And I got surprised by someone else coming into my space, one of my roommates or something like that. I definitely noticed that it felt like it destabilized me. And I had to take a lot of time to come back to that place. So for me, giving myself permission to actually create more stability in my life was huge. And I don't think I would have necessarily come to that as quickly as I did if I didn't have the knowledge that my four line needed more stability.
Yeah, because there can be so much judgment around feeling like you want to create more stability, right? A lot of times mentally, we can be so conditioned that stability is the most important thing and you have to sacrifice what you truly want, like aka not listening to your strategy and authority to have stability and safety and stay in a job that you hate or live in a town that you don't like or be around family members that are really toxic for you. But when you're getting to create your own stability, it's so important that you're using your strategy and authority to do so. So if you have clarity around like I don't want to live here anymore, it's important for you with this four energy to have a stable home life a stable place to rest your head and feel safe. It's about using your authority to look for alternatives where you would wanna go and making sure that that new place feels that sense of safety and stability as well. Um, Same thing with
And
your work.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, a really interesting thing is this stability, it has to be the right amount for you that your inner authority is guiding you towards, because a lot of traditional human design, content will say, like, if you have a 4 line, you must have another job lined up before you quit an old job because
Yeah.
you need that stability, and Shayna and I did not do that. Our inner authorities did not guide us to that. I mean, granted, we were at a time in our life where we were younger and we were sort of, it was a little bit easier for us to jump ship on one thing and live off of top ramen while we created the next thing. But I mean, for other people, when you have more responsibilities or you have like a bigger foundation that you are destabilizing, maybe your authority will want to really guide you to have that stable, easy, like set up next step before you jump off the cliff. But for us, we're like, we're not going to allow that to limit us. We have to really follow our inner authority, and that's guiding us to jump off the cliff, even though we are 4 lines.
Yes, and that's just a huge reminder that strategy and authority always comes first, and the reason why is because it's your navigation system in this energy plane that we're all in, right? It's what's guiding you towards what is resonant with your energy. And I think a lot of times we get lost mentally in this human design space, but we forget that like we're talking about energy here and what is resonant with your unique frequency and what isn't. And your strategy and authority is that compass that's letting your G center, your magnetic monopole, literally magnetize towards what is going to allow you to live out your purpose, the resources that are going to allow you to live out your purpose, the place, the home, the job, the partner, all of those things that are going to allow you to live out your purpose. So when you can trust fall into your strategy and authority, honestly, for me, that is the most stabilizing energy in my life. That's the safe place is I can just use my strategy and authority and I'm going to be guided where I need to go versus like I'm just out here poking around in the dark and I have no fucking clue what I'm doing or how I'm going. That's how I felt until I found human design. And so it brought that sense of stability and safety to me, even though I didn't know what I was doing with my job or how Day Luna was going to work out. And, there was that on paper sense of instability, but within myself, I felt very stable and safe. So that's why it's not black and white, right? That's why sometimes a lot of the verbiage that's used in really traditional human design spaces can feel really limiting to people because it's not taking into account the true uniqueness and differences in people's frequencies, even though they might have similar placements as someone else. It's not taking into account that unique karma and soul lessons that that person is meant to have. So, there's just so much that we can get into there, but I love 4-line energy. Every time I meet another 4-line, I end up having like a 3-hour lunch on accident because we were just
Same.
chatting and connecting and feeling so close. Um, and I love being the confidant. I love uh, being that kind person. It's a big part of our medicine with Day Luna is showering people in that love and that kindness and that intimacy. And it's a huge part of our purpose. So giant permission slip if you're listening to bring that sense of intimacy and closeness to your life and to lean in and to not judge yourself for it. And yeah, if you don't have 4-line energy, embrace the 4-line day, play around with it, see how it feels. But it just feels so good to get to have this spiritual sleepover vibe all the time on our podcast, but in our day to day life too.
Yes. So thank you for tuning in. We are so grateful to get to dive into this conversation with you, and we hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day.
And per usual, you know where you can find us, daylunalife.com on our website. Also, our Instagram at dayluna. And yeah, you can find your human design besties on there too. We'd love to see you. We meet face to face every month. So it'd be just so fun to connect and dive in that more intimate way there too. So we love you. Have a great, beautiful, close, intimate, all the things rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in with us today. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to follow along and learn more about human design.